I'll let you take it away if you want to shape this more of a form of a question, but I know you want to talk about love languages.
I do.
Hmm.
So does everybody know what the 5 love languages are?
So I kind of know that they're it's like acts of love or acts of like when you're doing something for someone or you say nice things or something like that. I don't know all of them.
Yeah,
Okay,
I know
so
what mine is, but I don't know what the 5 are.
Okay, so let me just go ahead and tell you what they are.
Okay.
So they are quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, as you mentioned, physical touch, and words of affirmation. Did I say quality time? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah,
I
that was
think
the
I got
first
them all,
one.
right? Okay. So there's a little quiz online actually. So if you ever were interested to see, it's free, and it just kind of, asks you a couple of questions and lets you know what your love language is if you haven't read the book. So Brian,
Sorry,
you were saying
I'm so sorry. I'm writing these down. So you said quality time, acts of service, receiving gifts.
physical touch
Physical touch.
and words of affirmation.
Okay, perfect.
So BG, you said you already know what yours is.
I do.
What is
Believe it
it?
or not, it's physical touch. So
Is it
I'm not,
really?
yeah, I don't like to use my words. I'm not good with words. I don't like to emote. All I need is, a hand on my shoulder, and I know that we're good.
Okay.
I actually get uncomfortable with words of affirmation or gifts, whatever the other ones are.
So do you feel like is that something that you also give? Like, so meaning that to your partner, is that how you show it as well?
No.
Like that's how you want to receive it, but how do you show it?
I don't know. That'd be a question for her. However, I know that her love language is more words of affirmation. So there's plenty of times where I have to make sure that I'm, conscious of, just being aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And
what about you, Adam?
Jen, do you know if there's any breakdown between what they've shown, like the number of people who are in each category?
I didn't do that deep of a dive into it. But when you do take the test online, it'll let you know which percentage you are at the very least of each of those categories. Got it. You answer the questions, it'll say, okay, well, you're this percent, it kind of categorizes it 1 through 5 and lets you know where you stand on that.
Got it. Because
I think to answer your question,
I think I did I can't remember, at some point we were at like a get together or something like that. And a bunch of people were like, oh, they were talking about it. And a bunch of us did like the test. I believe mine was acts of service. And I also believe that the way I show it is also acts of service. But I think the reason I asked the question was because it felt like to me more of the guys would say acts of service, like the things you do, and more of the women in the group were saying words of affirmation, that like they just want to be told something and for you to emote to them. So that's why I was asking. I don't know if there's some kind of division of, well, is there more percentage of people who like a certain thing?
Yeah. That's a really great question, and I'm positive there's an answer to it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So mine are for sure that. Like I just think I've always been a big believer in like what a person does over what they say. So I think gifts are nice, but I think gifts are like a momentary thing. I think touch, although again it's nice, but in my opinion, I feel like if you're in a relationship, it's expected. Quality time, that's a little harder for me to define. But like, acts of service is like if I'm doing something for you, if I'm gonna clean the house, do the dishes, if I'm gonna spend, my time, my life to like show you, hey, I really want this to be done. I really want to show you how much I care. That's to me at least, it's an ongoing thing. It's like on a daily basis, I can be doing something for you, right? And that means I'm giving my thought. That means I'm giving my time. It means I'm giving my energy and effort. Whereas like if I just get you a gift once in a while, like, okay, it's a moment thing. If I touch and time, like, I don't know, to me, it's always been, I've been a big proponent of like what you do over what you say.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you brought up though, that a lot of guys identify that they think that their love language is as an act of service. However, I would argue the point that a lot of relationships, one of the primary arguments is the guy doesn't equally do maybe what the female does. You know what I mean? Meaning they're always having to tell them to take out the trash or to pick up their laundry or all those kinds of things. Would you not agree with that statement as
No,
well?
I definitely would. I mean, I think for a lot of guys, there's definitely a double standard in some ways where they want they want the act, but then they say,
Yeah.
well, but I don't do that because you don't like it anyway. But like, it's not the point of why you did it. It's because you wanted to do it. Like, if you thought you were going to get something from it, then it's kind of different,
Yeah. And Brian,
Well,
you and I have talked about, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the funny thing about this is, no matter what you're doing, whether it's acts of service or something else, it's really pointless if it's not your partner's love language, right? I mean, I think, I shouldn't say pointless, but I think if you're doing acts of service over and over again, I'm looking around like, honey, I'm doing the dishes, I'm doing this for you, I'm doing this for you. And she's like, well, all I want you to do is tell me that I look nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I was just going to speak to what you're saying, because I know you and I have talked about how like Sunday, it's your jam to just wake up, be purposeful, clean the house. That's your day of the week that you do those things without anybody asking you or telling you. That's just something that brings you joy and also is for the greater good of the entire household, right? But I think that that's not necessarily the rule. I feel like you both, from what you're saying, are the exception, because I feel like in my circle, the common denominator would be that their partner isn't doing that much of anything at all. I don't know. I think that's probably a unfair generalization, but they think that they might be rising to the occasion, but they're, kind of missing the mark on a couple of things.
Yeah. Sounds like you might be dating the wrong guys.
Well, but likely. I think what happens too, though, is like, because we all, and like, full disclosure, I was pretty bad at this, I think, as far as the words of affirmation, because Brian, I agree with you 100%. Like, I was very big on acts of service, and my mind would just go to that all the time. It would go to, well, let me do this because I know we have this coming up. Let me take care of this so it doesn't have to be done, so we can spend more time together. Let me do, and it would be, let me do all of these things so that I can give us more time to do all the things we want to do. Right. But I was actually pretty bad at like the words of affirmation and really being able to say like, hold on, stop for a second. Like, hey, I really love you. I really care about you. You mean the world to me. Because in my head, it was like, well, yeah, it's pretty obvious. Like, look at everything. I mean, I spent 8 hours a day doing all this stuff. And I was definitely bad at that. And I've tried to get better at those kind of things. And I still am not doing well because I don't know what it is. I even had like a note in my phone. I'm like, give people compliments. So it'd be like the first thing I would see if I went to like my task list, and I still wouldn't do it because I don't know why, just like in my routine. But like I definitely think that we, in some cases, to your point, Jen, about people not doing what they kind of expect, I think we get kind of conditioned sometimes that if a person doesn't get the response that they think they want, they don't know the response that their partner wants. So if I give you a word of affirmation and you don't respond how I think you're going to respond, then I go, oh, it didn't work. But maybe to your partner, they go, oh no, that was perfect. That was exactly what I wanted. But we don't see that. Does that make sense?
For sure.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Do you watch Impact Theory at all?
I have, yeah.
Adam or Brian? So there are a couple, Tom Bilyeu and his wife, and they talk a lot about words of affirmation. Holy moly, about the love languages. And so, they did an interview together, and he was kind of talking about how, like, if she were to get him a picture of like a racy, I was trying to craft my words here, a racy photo of herself in a picture, that he would just kind of be like, what am I going to do with this? Like, you know what I mean? And for her, she's thinking like, oh my gosh, like I killed the game. Like, this is so sexy. And like, he's going to love this. I put it in a frame for him to like, look at. And he's like, no, that's not, I mean, like for me, I would want physical touch. Physical touch is my love language. That's what he's saying to her. So I just thought it was really interesting. In a lot of ways you can pass it off and say it doesn't matter. And I want to agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying also, Adam, in that, for me, like, actions and words have to match. So even if our love language didn't match, if you follow through with your actions, in my personal opinion, that does convey a certain level of love. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, I mean, because that's huge, right? I mean, like, so maybe if you're like with Brian, he's not good at like, putting the emotions forward to tell her whatever it is, but like you said, he does what he says he's going to do. He says he's going to do it. And then also, in addition to those other things, he is performing acts of service. So those are kind of huge, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with what you're saying in regards
Well,
to
Jen,
that.
from a woman's point of view too, because I think here's the thing for me at least. When I would give those words of affirmation, they would be more infrequent, but they would be a lot more genuine and a lot more heartfelt. And again, this is just my own personal thing, but I would think if I told my partner every single day, "Oh my God, you look so beautiful. Oh my God, I love you." I think like I don't want to say the novelty wears off, but to me, it always felt like, well, it feels cheap. It feels like forced, and it feels devalued over time, because if I do it every day, it's just not special, right? So although if you ask a person whose, love language is words of affirmation, they may say, no, 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 you could never say it enough. But in my head, I go, well, but am I devaluing it if I say it if I got you roses every single day? Well, is the 70th day special?
Yeah, I agree with that. So I guess I want to explore that a little bit in the sense of when you say, so like, for instance, I'll use my daughter as an example. I probably tell the kid I love her 100 times a day.
Yeah.
It's just something I want to tell her, whether she's doing nothing or something special. And again, maybe I'm creating a monster, I don't really know, and I don't care, because it's how I genuinely feel. And I want her, like, I'll say to her every night, I want you to know in your heart every day that mommy loves you. Do you know that in your heart? And she'll say, yes, mommy. So I mean, to speak to your point, like, I guess, is it something that you at least said to your partner, like, let's just say before bed, hey, I love you, good night, or that kind of thing? Or you mean like you'd wait like months to say, I love you? Yikes.
I think the problem is that guys don't think to do it, right? Like, it has to be an intentional action for us. And it's just something, I mean, guys are just dumb, right? Generally speaking, guys are dumb and they don't think about it.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I guess, God, because I would give like the affirmation or the compliment when it was really like, when it was warranted, I guess. I mean, sorry, it wasn't like months and months and months, but it would be, if a thing, okay, I'm very big on saying thank you about everything. So if anyone does anything for me, it's like, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Now, to give a compliment, it's like, well, okay, in my mind, and again, this maybe comes from the acts of service, I kind of feel like, you had to do something to warrant that thing. So if like, and I think what's different about parents and kids, because I'm the same way with kids. Like if I see kids, I'm like, baby, I love you, baby, all day long. But I think there's a certain sense that provides more security for a kid than love. I mean, I don't have a kid, but maybe like, because if your parent tells you every day, I love you, I'm there for you, that like reaffirmation constantly lets them know, hey, I'm in a safe place. I'm secure. My mom and my home base is good, but a partner is kind of different in a sense that we inherently make that like unsigned contract that like, yeah, we're in this together. So I just didn't want to devalue it, but I would always give it when it was warranted. And in times where it was like a really special thing, say anniversary or whatever it was, I would go out of my way to like make sure I craft like a nice message or card or something like that,
I mean, that's interesting. It's just a different perspective. I totally respect what you're saying. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. And I say that only because it seems as though both from Brian, and I know, Brian, you're constantly doing projects around the house that show Sarah that you just, you care about her, like whether that's, the paneling on the walls or redoing the floors or all these little honeydew pet projects, you do those things because you know that it's special to her and she wants the house to look a certain way. And then, on the other hand with you, like you said, if I'm doing the dishes and all those things. But so I guess my question is like, so if you are on the phone with your loved one, and Brian, you as well, do you end the conversation like if you're apart from one another and say like, I love you, or not even then?
No, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Agreed.
Okay. Just asking.
I think I'm speaking more in terms of like compliments or intentional compliments, little things like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, because like give someone a compliment, like, oh, you look really nice today, like, or babe, I love you so much, like those kind of things. I would say I love you on the phone call. Or our thing was more of like a kind of a childish kind of like, we'd play around with each other. So I'd mess around and like say little funny things, and it wasn't the exact kind of like mushy love stuff that you want, but it was just another version of what I thought was like affection. But again, I guess the real lesson that I've learned is like, and to Brian's point, it doesn't really matter because it's what a person interprets, right? Like, I can think that I'm doing the thing, And I'm not, and I'm definitely not doing it in a way that the person will react to in the best possible way.
Right.
And that's
And I
really
mean,
hard.
well, I think that the great thing about these conversations is I can say personally, it's definitely provoked me to think about a lot of things that probably had not even entered my mind. So that's number one. And number two, I mean, I guess I hope that the takeaway is to add value in some way, because again, as we've spoken about, Brian, although you're coupled, I mean, I think it's so important just to like, or for Adam, you know, when you find somebody, like, you know, to sit down and say to that person, you know, how do you receive love? Like, what does that look like to you? And this is how I do. And so I want you to know that when I do these things, they're intentional. You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing them because it means this to me. So like I said, I think that the valuable takeaway is that it's something that should be explored.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
No, you're 100% right. And honestly, this brings up an interesting thought for me, because, you know, as I've even been dating, there's a lot of things that I've started to notice where, and I'd love to get both you guys like thoughts on this. What happens if a person thinks that their love language is one thing, and it actually may be, but then there also may be something, let's say, for example, like quality time, for example, right? Like some people, I think I've noticed that if they've come from abandoned homes, or they've had relationships where, let's say, the partner wasn't as like present or whatever it is, they may say, well, I love like receiving gifts or words of affirmation. But over the long term, the longevity of someone just actually being there, they end up maybe valuing more in the end than they did in the beginning. Because in the beginning you go, well, I like the words and I like the gifts, and they will say that that's their love language. But really, truly deep down, they may not know that, like, really, like, just someone just being there for them and giving that quality time. Like, what do you guys think about that?
Brian, go ahead.
I mean, I think it's just communication, right? And it's funny because I don't think that my wife and I ever had this conversation. I just, you know, you kind of learn from being with somebody for so long. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just communication. It's either having that conversation with them, which, you know, I imagine could be awkward sometimes, or just conversations like this and just being aware. I'm sure when I hang up this call, I'll be a lot better at giving words of affirmation for the next, you know, 2 or 3 days until I forget again.
Yeah. So for me, like, I think that, I think that as long as you're paying attention to detail and you're genuinely just trying to communicate, you know, how can you go wrong with that, right? And so what I mean by that is, like, so let's just say receiving gifts was my jam, and, you know, you gave me a bumblebee phone cover, like a plastic bumblebee phone cover, and I'm a professional, you know, and it's not like that I'm that serious, but for me, like, it shows me that you don't really know me that well, which I have received one, by the way. But, you know, or like, I would never consider myself a materialistic person, and I'm not like a gift kind of girl. Like, that's not my thing. But if you are going to get me a gift, you better know like your stuff, because what it shows me, if you're getting me something, like you get me a size 12 and I wear a size 2, or if you got me, you know, a pistachio latte and I'm allergic to nuts, or something like that, you know, you're not paying attention. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think that those things are just so important. I don't know if that answers your question, but
well, I want to revise it a bit, because I think what I'm really saying is, like, okay, so for example, the person who might think that my love language is receiving gifts, right? But what's the reason why you like receiving gifts? Does gifts make you feel like, oh, this person is willing to give things that they could spend on themselves for me? Do they like it because they actually like the actual act of gift giving and like the fun of it? Like, well, wow, I get this new thing that's not, I mean, what's the reason? Because I think sometimes the reason can be a little bit more deep rooted than what the surface is. Right. So if a person, again, who maybe grew up in a household where they didn't have Christmas gifts that much, or they didn't, you know, they may say, oh, it's gifts, but really it's like, I just want someone there to be there to give me a gift.
Yeah.
Well, and this doesn't really answer the question, but I think that's a good point as far as, is it more deep rooted? I think that, you know, you could ask that question about all the different languages. You know, I think in my households, we didn't use words that much. You know, we all knew that we loved each other, but to this day, we don't really say it that much. So I think for that reason, it's uncomfortable for me to receive those words, and I have to show it in different ways. So I definitely agree. I think it's more deep rooted than just the surface level.
Agreed. I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. I think it's very intricate and complex because people are, but I also think that maybe sometimes it could be very superficial and kind of like you said, maybe they just like to get gifts and that's exciting for them. One of my best friends from home, nothing makes her more excited than to receive a gift. She cannot wait for Christmas. She can't wait for her birthday. And so I think that it could go either end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, I guess it'd be a fun exercise to see if maybe we can kind of dive into that and see, because I mean, I'll go first and I'll give you guys kind of, I guess, maybe my reason, and then I'll go through the other ones and say how I thought about them. But I think for me, again, like acts of service, because I think me growing up, our family was never really very close, and we didn't really do things for each other like a family. It was more out of obligation, let's say. So if I think of the word or the concept of quality time, okay, I can, put the caveat on quality, but like, yeah, you spend a lot of time together, but yet it never felt like you could even define what quality was. Cause if you're just around people enough, it was like, okay, well, we're there, we're family. I guess it means something. Or if we gave each other gifts for Christmas or birthdays, again, just my sense was like, it felt more out of like obligation. Cause like, oh, you kind of have to, physical touch. I mean, yeah, we didn't really have a lot of that. And then words of affirmation, and we didn't have a lot of that either. But if you did say something nice, it felt more forced. So I guess the reason why I think that acts of service is mine is because it just always reminded me that like anything in a moment can come and go. Like, so I give you a gift, I say something nice, it comes and it goes. And even with my family, I can go, well, we all did some parts of those things, spent time, gave gifts, had, touch and affirmation. But the real true thing of like, I'm going to do something for you that I don't have to do, and no one would know if I did it or not. And I would get no credit for it, but I'm still going to do it. At least to me, that just felt from my past, my history, me growing up, it just feels more genuine and more deep rooted because of that fact. And again, that's definitely because of how I grew up.
Ryan?
You know what I think is terrible? And this is kind of off topic, but when going back to words of affirmation, I think them all day long.
Yeah.
They just don't come out of my mouth. I'm like, I catch myself doing it. It's awful. It is awful. And I don't know why that is. I mean, I guess again, it's because I'm just not used to using my words, but I will think the compliments in my head. I'll sit here and I'll tell you guys about how wonderful my relationship is and how wonderful my wife is. Yeah. If I'm being honest, I don't know if I've told her that lately, so it's something you always have to be aware of and conscious of.
No, and Jen, just so you know too, like I do the exact same thing, and in my relationship, I did the exact same thing. I would think it all the time. I go, fuck, like I just not saying it. And I don't know if that's like a guy thing, because I mean, I am very verbal and I talk all the time, and I would have the thought, or I'd be sitting there, I'd be like, oh wow, she looks nice, but I just wouldn't say it. And I have,
well, that
even
surprises me about you. I am very surprised about your end of this. Brian, I know well, and that does not surprise me about him. And just because I know him and I know all the things he's done, for the house and all these things, but with you, it does surprise me, honestly, because you are very good at communicating your thoughts and your feelings. And so it is surprising. So thank you for being accountable.
I wanted to say that because I know it's not just like, say, a person who says, hey, I'm not very verbal. Like, I'm extremely verbal. I talk all the time. I break everything down. And even in those moments, and I would think about the moment and I'd go, oh yeah, that just happened. And then maybe an hour later I'd go, dude, why didn't you say it? And I'm like, and now I couldn't because it felt fake now, even though maybe I should have still, but in my head, it now feels fake. If I was like, oh, an hour ago kind of thing.
No, you could just say, you know what? Like, I totally got sidetracked, but I wanted to let you know that you look really nice today.
I know, God, like what? Again, yeah.
That's genuine.
I know.
It's not contrived. You're not, it's not like you're, trying to be Lance Romance. Like, hey, baby, I just, for an ulterior motive. Like, it's genuinely how you feel.
2.5 weeks ago, you look great.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That one day that you fixed your hair during quarantine, I liked it.
Right. Well, I think the lesson we can take from this is, just to always be aware, always be conscious of what you're doing, what you're not doing, and what the other person kind of expects from you. I think even though I admittedly am not as good as I'd like to be, I think just having discussions like this, it's more top of mind now than it normally is. So that doesn't mean to say that I force things, but if I'm thinking it now, I'm a little more prone to saying it, speaking it.
Yeah. Hey everybody, I'm Adam Khalil. Thank you so much for listening to this video. I definitely want you to subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more content like this. But if this content had any value to you, click the like button as well.